Healthcare is like walking into like a store and there's no price tags on any items. And you just throw the item in your cart and you pray that it's not like expensive.
If you get a deal that you know is not good, just don't even say, I'm going to think about it. Just reject it straight away.
One thing I realized about investment bankers is that they actually change their advice depending on who's paying them and who's putting pressure on them.
Welcome to the Founders in Arms podcast with me, Immad and Raj, founder and CEO of Mercury.
And I'm Raj Suri, founder of Lima and Tribe.
All right, today we have Daniel Kivatinos. He is currently the founder of Get Paid. And before that, he founded a company called DrChrono. Welcome to the pod, Daniel.
Yeah, it's great to be on. Thank you guys for having me.
Give us like a very quick, 10-second description of your new company and what your old company did. And I guess you exited it. Congratulations. I know that was a few years ago, but tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, thank you. My new company is Get Paid. Basically, we are a way to collect the revenue for any company in the United States using AI and basically allowing people to do it with less people. Leveraging all of the new AI technology that's out there today. My older company, which was DrChrono, was the very first medical record on the iPad. And we launched that, and it was a huge success. Sold that company a few years ago, and it was a really, really fun journey, but it was a medical-focused startup.
Is the acquisition price public or is it private?
If you dig, you can find information, but I generally just keep quiet, and then people make their own assumptions about what the price was, and I just kind of don't say anything. But
all right,
you could probably Google some stuff, I'm sure.
Daniel said it was one of the highest acquisition prices for any Y Combinator company. So there, we'll keep it vague like that. Let's see. So there's so much to talk about here, Daniel. I think I kind of want to talk about the acquisition process, and I sold my previous company. And I guess Raj went public, so maybe he doesn't have any good acquisition stories. But maybe before we do that, Raj has a fun story about an intern, which is completely unrelated to Daniel. So we were just talking about it a second ago, so I want to finish the end of that story.
Yeah, we were talking before the show about crazy intern stories. It sounded like Immad had some interns as well that were off the hook. But it'd be hard to beat my story. So it's at some point, at Presto, we had 30 people working out of a house in Palo Alto. We had a ragtag bunch for sure, but it was, we were becoming a professional company selling to big enterprise chains. But, I was still at this mode where I was sleeping on the floor of the, the house every day. So that's where I lived, actually. It was in that house, but we were working there all the time as well. So it was a little bit like the Facebook house, which we had back in the day as well. It was only a couple years before us. And so we had this intern who was just with us for 8 weeks or so. He seemed like a very normal person. Seemed like a great guy, very kind, living in East Palo Alto, and, everything was going great. One day, though, I was sleeping, in this house alone at night, and someone opened my bedroom door. And it's this guy, and he comes in and he grabs my wallet off my desk while I'm there and sleeping. And I hear other voices, like he's with other people. And he just walks out, and I'm like, what just happened? I'm like, give me back my wallet. And I just hear like a bunch of people talking, in this house, and then they walk away. And I call him. I'm like, what's going on? You just came into my wallet. And he's just like laughing maniacally, like a crazy person.
Okay.
And I'm like, what's going on? I leave the house. I'm panicking. I'm like, is this going to be I didn't feel safe or secure at all. I mean, somebody just walked in and, took my wallet. And it didn't seem like he was in a normal state, It seemed like, the beginning of like a superhero movie or something, and so it was, and then, so I was I'm driving around Palo Alto trying to figure out what to do, calling all my employees, trying to figure out what's going on with this guy. And I get a call from the police. And they said, hey, we picked up this guy who is on some drugs. And, we found your wallet with no cash in it, but had your driver's license. So we just called you. And you can come pick it up. And we have to take this guy to jail. Because he went around Stanford, actually, defacing Stanford, putting graffiti on on all different buildings of Stanford, and so vandalizing Stanford basically. And so I went to get my wallet. Found a different place to stay. I went to stay at a hotel. I didn't want to stay there. And it turned out he had gone with some or he had combined with some East Palo Alto drug people, and gone in with the wrong crowd. And I guess they had asked him for money for drugs, so he came in and grabbed my wallet instead. So I don't know what drugs he was on. I didn't. We didn't have that type of conversation.
Wow, that's a crazy story.
But it doesn't end there, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, I obviously fired him the next day, but he kept coming to the office. He kept showing up, and you keep showing up at the house at random times, even when after.
What college was he from? Was he from Stanford?
No, he was from East Coast technical school,
Okay.
And he just kept showing up to the house, and he was kind of harassing me actually after that. So. I guess CEO security is a thing now. Hopefully after this week, right? You got a CEO shot, but I felt very insecure. And then I started to think how do I protect myself, right? And then I started, I went to the police and I went to the court and I asked them what do I do here? You have to get a restraining order, but the restraining order doesn't really do anything. It doesn't you have to wait till that person is within a certain amount of time and then you can call the police. It's basically nobody was helpful. And then you start realizing why people buy guns, is because they need to protect themselves, or you need to hire a security guard basically. But yeah, that continued for a while until finally I think his parents ended up coming and taking him away to rehab. And he still was on trial and stuff like that. So it was not a good experience. And I would say it's one of the risks of being a founder CEO, I think, is you become a target.
Well, I've never had something quite as bad as that. We used to just hire interns after literally one coding test, one conversation. I was like, wow, you did the coding test. Yeah, welcome in. It was such a low bar. And then half the time they were productive, and the other half of the time they were a complete disaster. But that's the way it was. Are you got any crazy intern stories, Daniel?
I mean, I would say I have a couple. I mean, there was one time I went to Chipotle in Palo Alto, actually, and I'm like, this kid is so friendly. We should just hire him for our company and have him do sales. And then literally I walk up to the kid and I'm like, hey, thank you for the Chipotle, but we're a startup. And he's like, what's a startup? I have a lot of fun intern stories. And the kid quit his job that week and just started trying to sell for our company. And literally, I think we changed his life. He works in San Francisco now. He's been in San Francisco several years.
So was he successful? At your company?
I would say it was his first job. So it was bumpy, but he was learning so much so fast about startups. I saw him absorbing so much in that world. I would say it changed his life because he just was in sales the rest of his. I haven't spoken to him in 5 years, but
wow,
he's been. He called me 5 years ago, and he's like, "Hey, I'm in San Francisco, and I'm in sales and doing this thing." And he's like, "Thank you so much for the chance and whatnot." So he was pretty. I would say successful. A lot of people just leave sales and just.
But what was the vibe he had that you were like, I need to bring this person in?
This is something I realize. It's I call it the Disney vibe. There's a certain type of person that just has this charm about them, and then they just try to make everybody feel good around them. And I notice it here and there, and that's when I'm in the looking for salespeople, it's one of these things where you might find it in somebody, but a lot of people are already professional salespeople. He just was literally working at Chipotle, and you're like, oh, this is. You could recruit here. Go figure. You could recruit anywhere.
I've had many of those sort of instances. I tried to once recruit my car dealer salesperson. Because he was actually a pretty good salesperson. But I've recruited waiters. To come work with us. Oh, we were working in restaurant tech, so it actually made sense. But I just found a waiter who seemed really energetic and passionate about technology. I'm like, okay, come work with us. You have to look for talent everywhere, right?
Yeah. I remember a guy came to our offices once and he was selling me Zipcar. Zipcar? You guys remember Zipcar? Yeah. I don't know if it's still around or not. But I'm like, how about you work for me? And the guy literally was like, I'll do it. So when people are trying to sell you stuff, I literally flip the script in my head and I'm like, if this is actually a pretty good salesperson. And I'm like, how do I convince them to work for me? And I've done that a few times successfully. So like as an entrepreneur, you're so busy in your day. It's like if someone's going to try to sell you something and you like the person or actually doing an interview right in front of you, it's like, oh, this is great. But I haven't had horror stories like Raj. So
Yeah.
so that's
Eventually you'll become jaded, Daniel.
I've had like other crazy stories too, but we can go into. I've had like one like IT person who turned out to be like a Nazi, who again
wow.
seemed like a perfectly normal person while he was working with us. But he worked on a boat. I might have told you the story, Ahmad, but
Yeah, I think,
yeah. And then he joined like the Nazi party, and
I mean, did that
actually
change?
ran for election in California. Huh?
He ran for election as a Nazi party member.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Was his work good?
It was okay. It wasn't great, but
Not
he
good
was
enough to make
like,
up for his weed.
Yeah. It was like nothing great or nothing terrible. Yeah, just enough not to get fired, I guess.
Yeah.
But like he was with us for like a year or two, and none of us would have suspected that.
Wow. That is crazy.
how do you even detect for that? How do you even like look for that? You know, it's like on the interview, it's like you get a resume, you talk to them, and it's like, how do you find those?
I mean, also, you don't want to discriminate against political views, but obviously this is like beyond the pale. But you can't ask them, like, what are your political views? Like, tell me about it.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
But
But
maybe
there
we're
is
touching on
something related to that. One thing related to that is like tweets. Like like, do you guys like do a check on people's tweets or public statements? Because there are sometimes like extreme things that are put out there. You know, for example, if someone tweeted in the past 5 years, like, "Oh, I like beating up women" or something like that, right? Like, we haven't had that situation, but we did have a situation where people had very like sort of edgy tweets, and then actually other employees discovered it and said that made them uncomfortable. Do you guys ever have that situation?
I feel like people have got better about their social media presence. I think that's like a 5-8 years ago situation. I can imagine it happening, and I think it has happened. But yeah, recently nothing like that. Like as Mercury is scaled, I feel like everyone's like very aware of like their public persona.
I mean, I look, of course I look, you know, and you get a sense of somebody when you're looking at their social media. I mean, whatever they put out there, they put out there. They don't realize it, but you just are looking and you're like, okay, they're doing this, they're doing that, whatever, you know, it's just part of someone's life. So I try not to judge too much, but if there's like a red flag, if they're holding like, I don't know, something like a Nazi flag, I'd be like, all right,
Yeah, that's
a no-go for us. That's not good.
But you know, every now and then I say something, and I mean to say it in a very like, you know, oh, I'm just being useful, I was just saying something, and then people misconstrue it like so extremely. So like, yeah, like sometimes an innocent thing can be like very much misconstrued. So I would worry about like just looking at someone's like social media and not giving them a chance to explain.
Yeah, I mean that's really true.
Yeah, you
That's
have to
really
give them a
true.
chance. Yeah.
Yeah. I think if someone's holding like a beer bottle or whatever, even if it's political views, I really don't look at that. I'm looking for like red flags, like extreme red flags, like
Yeah, of course.
someone holding a knife to someone's throat or something. Like, oh, what's happening there? That doesn't look safe.
What do we think about this kind of, sorry to kind of turn the topic on something a bit negative. Yeah, the United Healthcare CEO was shot down in Manhattan. I don't know if you've seen the video clip, but it was kind of a crazy clip. And I guess the most disturbing thing was so many people on the internet saying, wow, that's a good thing because, you know, these health insurance companies are evil or something like that. I guess like two things, like, you know, is this going to change the way people think about security? I mean, I feel like America is generally a high trust society where, you know, you can access billionaires, right? Especially in Silicon Valley, they're like around and just living a normal life. I guess I'll touch on that first.
It's a weird case because I think healthcare touches everybody in all these different ways. Like, I don't know the situation. I actually didn't look into it at all. I just heard about it from a few friends and what's going on in someone's mind when, like, I don't know, their mom has cancer and they get denied coverage. Like, people get really emotional, right?
Yeah.
And their mom has like 2 months to live. It's like people just are not in their right mind at that moment, and it's not good. And healthcare is just one of those areas that people just get emotional. It's just like plain and simple. Like, if people are dying, if someone in your family is like really sick, and like, I'll give you another example. They have these specialty meds. One pill could be like $5,000. If they deny you one pill, like that literally could change your life, and it's really scary. And God knows what happened in this situation. It's just healthcare is just a tough topic because it's meshed with corporations and profits and all of that. So you bring these two together. It's a really stressful environment. And you're creating a stressor, which is unlike other areas, like with like people that buy iPhones. It's like your phone broke. You're going to be angry. You lost some photos, but you're not like your family member is not ill. I don't even know what happened in the situation with this person. I really didn't look into so I'm just making assumptions in my head.
I don't think anyone knows yet.
But there's news today. There's news today that the
really?
bullet casings had like words
Etchings
on them.
Yeah.
Like deny and delay. So I think we got to kind of get a sense of the motive there.
Yeah, it was definitely motivated by that. I find I'm from the UK, so the US system was like crazy to me because I'm like, okay, it is a crazy system because you've got these private incentives and then there's so much regulation and socialism. Like the US spends way more money on healthcare per person, like the government does, than the UK does. I don't know about Canada. But people complain in the UK all the time as well, right? Like it's not like necessarily like, hey, if it was government run, it would just be suddenly better. Like people are just continuously there's less extreme stuff. Like if you have cancer, you get treatment, but anything that like you're not immediately dying, you can be delayed for years. My mom had an incident. It took like 2 years to get treated. And I was in the US, it would have been treated within a month probably. And it was massively reducing her quality of life during that time period. So I don't know what a better answer is, but the US answer definitely seems like not correct.
Yeah, there's two things here, right? So one is, I think, security for CEOs and key people in or just executives at companies. I was interested to read about like the stats on how much like Meta spends on security, right? And like Elon, for example, has spends many millions of dollars on his own security. He has his own security company, like it's an LLC that like his companies pay to keep Elon secure. Which makes sense.
And this is a $540 billion company. I'm actually surprised he doesn't have like someone tailing him from security.
Yeah, it's right. I mean, at some scale, you need to have. I would say at a much smaller scale, even. You probably when you're in the billions, you probably want the founders, CEOs,
especially when you're in a
it is,
sensitive industry, right? Like I think if you're doing like I don't know B2B software, maybe no one cares.
It's true.
No one's coming after Daniel.
I think it's a lot. I mean, it is a controversial, payments and that sort of thing, but it's not like healthcare, which is such a touchy subject that once you're charging somebody a lot of money for services and the person is sick and you're going bankrupt. I mean, the bankruptcy rate in the United States is higher than anything. I don't know if you guys know this. The bankruptcy rate for people like in paying for medical care is really drastically high. So you get even not only is it the family member that's like ill or you that have these medical issues, but a lot of Americans are going bankrupt in the process. So imagine going bankrupt while you have cancer, right? It's like the most extreme stress that anyone can go through. So if he or she, whoever was involved in this thing, like there might have been way more stress than people realize. I don't know. I don't know. I mean,
apparently 62% of, this is Google AI, so I don't know if it's correct, but 62 to 66.5% of bankruptcies in the US are medical related. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, one surgery is like, could be $100,000, $200,000. That's someone's whole life savings. So they just get the surgery done. They're struggling, and then on top of that, they have to go visit the hospital multiple times. And then they're being charged $20K, $50K, and then instant bankrupt, whatever life savings they have would be gone. That happens so often.
Apparently Elon Musk spent $2.4 million in 2023 on security. It does seem like a lot. And also you end up doing other things like changing your life to be more secure. Like, you do private jets and like buy houses that are more secure. So I'm sure the cost is much higher.
I would propose that like any public company executive team should have some security. If you're a B2C company, you probably need way more security because like you're public figures and like a lot of people are using your services. B2B, I think is much less, but B2C, you need a lot of security, I think, because you're a public figure. I used to feel like that, like I was, somewhat of a target as well, even just going public. Like there's because people could lose money on the stock price or whatever, and you do get random emails, random like hey your stock price went down yesterday. What the f, man? Like you get like there's a lot of stuff like that. So people are looking to target you. So I think there needs to be. I mean, we're in a country with a lot of guns, so there's you need to be careful here. On the healthcare politics, I fully agree with you guys. I want to make a prediction that I think that at some point someone's going to run and win for president just on healthcare and just on like making healthcare better in the U.S. I mean, you can argue that Obama already did it to some degree, but he didn't really run on it. But I think like this Bernie Sanders movement of like healthcare is a human right. Like I think that's going to happen in the U.S. Someone's going to run and win on this movement. And like a little bit like Trump won on immigration, illegal immigration. It's like such a big problem. It affects so many people. And by the way, it's actually popular to make it better.
I mean, is it fixable? Like, how would you even fix it?
I think a public-private option would be the best solution. Like you have a public option, basically, and then or you have private options, but there's like a default public, like schools, right? Like you could go to a public school, but you could also pay for a private school.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a problem with lack of transparency. So, like, if you go in, I read this one article once, and it made total sense to me. It's like healthcare is like walking into like a store, and there's no price tags on any items, and you just throw the item in your cart, and you pray that it's not like expensive.
Well, also the person selling it to you says you're gonna die if you don't take this option. It's like even worse than no price tags.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's hard.
You know what I think? I have like two changes that I think aren't that extreme, and almost everyone would agree on, but that would like massively change healthcare. I think number one, no group health insurance. I think all health insurance should be paid for by you. And I mean, you have to have like price transparency around it, and we can make it so it's tax free to pay for it. But I think it's insane. Like if you lose your job, you lose your health. Like that's just like how can we even live like that? So I think that's one, and that would, because right now there is literally no price discovery in this like health insurance process, and this would force people to actually make a choice and have some data around that. And then the second thing is don't allow any advertising for like pharma. I just think there's no upside from like these advertising, and there's tons of like downside, in my opinion. Do you have any other quick tweaks?
It's a tough one. I mean, one thing that the government did do, and I was involved in this, is they had a data exchange essentially. So there was a lot of data hostaging in the past, which, you put medical data into a facility and you never let it leave. So if you need it, you'd have to pay. And that's what, was happening in the past. So I think the government was really trying to impose APIs. Go figure, APIs, it's super modern. It makes sense. They were forcing healthcare companies to like open up APIs to pull some of the data. So like probably way more data exchange in the future. Like if there's an emergency and you need to take your data wherever, say I'm traveling to England, it's like I should be able to bring like instantly like have my data available for me whenever I want. But the government is like really pushing for that way more. It's gotten way better than it has in the past. Everything was through fax in the past or paper. Mm-hmm. But it is a different world. I think, there are so many things you can do in healthcare to like make it better. But I really like what you said, Immad, like that. I don't know. Those are two, if they made just those two changes, that would be great. Like,
yeah, and you don't need to change the system that much. It just feels like it would suddenly improve things.
But don't you think you need like a public option or like a public, like public schools? Everyone has a right to education.
I just worry about like the way America does these public-private things is like, it becomes like this bastardization of like the worst of both things. I mean, the US has a public-private thing. It's just like literally the worst of both. It's like, when you get old or you're poor enough, you get medicine, but like it's crazy expensive for everyone else that's like, not in this kind of 5% extremes. Like I don't feel like the US will do a good job of providing it, but if someone has like a very clear mind and a plan for it, maybe.
Yeah, I just think like education, every kid can go to school in the US. There's a public option. I think everyone should be able to go to the hospital and get treatment. And that's going to have some cost as a society, but we have to all bear that cost. But there is like a lot of optional treatments. I mean, I think the Canadian system, for all its issues, they probably could have more private options, but in general, it's pretty good.
Lots of people
And,
also complain about that, though.
Of course, people complain about everything. I was actually looking at an interesting stat. Yesterday, I was looking at the approval ratings of the entire G7, G8. Every single one of the presidents and prime ministers are significantly in the red. Like not a single one has like a positive approval rating. It's just like we're always dissatisfied with what we have. That is the state of people, and so there's never a good option. But I think you're always picking like a slightly better version of where you are.
All right, let's talk about something that's maybe more interesting to founders in general.
Yeah.
One thing, when I sold my company in 2016, I thought there was like a general dearth of advice around M&A and acquisitions. There's a lot of advice around fundraising. A, less people go through M&A, but B, it's like tends to be fairly private, and people don't want to show off that they like made money. And I think it just creates this element of like, I really didn't feel like I knew what I was doing or had good kind of advice out there. So, Daniel, what would you say are like, I don't know, your top 3 learnings through your process, and maybe some mistakes that you felt that you made?
I think one thing is just learn the process. Like for founders, like learn what has to happen for you to sell a company. And at the end of the day, a company is a product. Like I know people don't realize that, but it's a product. If you want to sell it, it's there to be sold. Mm-hmm. So you have to really like take care of it and make sure all the documents are signed and make sure everything is like appropriate and prepared. And, a lot of founders are like focused on the product and the revenue. At the end of the day, that's the most important thing, but you are building a product. So it's like, you're either going to bring that product public, you're going to like keep it private, or you're going to sell it to somebody. And those are like the real 3 options. This is the thing about like building a company and like, going through a process. There's no real like perfect formula.
Sure.
There's like some guide rails, like just get all your signed documents from your employees, put them in one place. Like as silly as that sounds, like those are the things that just help. Cause imagine if that derails its sale. Like that sucks. Like you have to like take care of like the basic stuff. And
I think the thing that I found really tricky, and I don't know, maybe you had a different experience, but I've talked to a lot of founders that also had this, is it just takes a really long time. Fundraising, you can, if it goes well, you can get it done in a month. If it goes badly, it takes like 3 months. I mean, obviously you might never get it done, but acquisition processes take like a year from like first conversation to acquiring. And it's very hard when it takes that long, because you're trying to run your company and make progress while you have this whole process going on, and you have to have enough money to last that long. And, at any one point, this thing can fall apart, and you have all this like emotional investment. And I was definitely not prepared for the amount of time it took. And I think there's ways that like people can accelerate that. One piece of advice I wish I had got was to really do a ton of the negotiation before signing the term sheet. As soon as you sign that term sheet, especially if you're selling to a PE type person, everything is kind of slowed down. You've lost leverage. It can take a really long time. And I think it took us like 4 months after we signed the term sheet to actually close the deal, with like tons of negotiations after the term sheet signing, which was like probably the worst aspect of the whole process.
Yeah. Immad, have you acquired companies yet at Mercury?
Yeah, we just acquired a company called Teal 3 months ago. So it was interesting seeing it from the other side. And, I was like, this is how we're not going to treat this company. And we ran a very different process to the one I faced as an acquiree.
Yeah, I felt like I did acquire companies in my last role. And like one thing I grew empathy for is just like because I'm a founder myself, talking to other founders, you understand what they're going through, and it probably helps, I guess, if you're selling company, to sell to another founder and have that relationship directly. If it's a founder-led company, if it's a PE firm, I think it's a very different experience, probably, right? Like you're talking to finance people. There's going to be a lot of other. Just be prepared for a very different journey, depending.
I mean,
on
I've heard lots of horror stories, even from people selling to other founders. So
really?
It can go both ways. Yeah. I won't disclose who, but, pretty well-known founder in a pretty well-known company kind of, screwed over.
What's the horror story, though? Like what happened?
Normally it's around like any payment that happens after the close. Like there's normally like an earn out. At that point, like you are an employee, right? Like when you're selling your company, you're a company, and then like you have lawyers, you have like a process, but afterwards you work at this company and you're an employee, and you can't. It's very hard as an employee to actually like have a pay for a lawyer or like even come up, have the time and ability to come up with a defense against like being screwed over. So any amount of money that you're going to get after that point, especially if it's contingent on some objectives, right? If there's like any sort of performance contingency, is like completely at risk. Like I would put the probability of getting that extra money out like below 50%, even if you feel like you're definitely going to hit all the objectives, because you just don't know. I mean, and it might not even be malicious in some situations, but the objectives, the company's objective in some ways is to pay less, right? Like it's just like you flip like they already have the asset, they're already like in a position of power. The incentives are just not great for the employee at that point or the founder.
I feel like this is like a central point of tension in any acquisition discussion, right? Like it's like the people selling want as much money up front, the people buying want as much money, on the come, right? So I felt this was a very difficult point to resolve, but it depends on kind of all the leverages everyone has around the table. Have you figured out a good solution to that, like a fair way to deal with that? Because from my perspective, as an acquiring company, I always felt like people should be paid fairly for like the value they add. But like I was working with other people who didn't feel that, who were like, let's squeeze them, let's let's find ways to pay them less.
I think this is actually good for the acquirer and the acquiree, is to not have performance-based goals on the acquisition. Mm-hmm. So don't say like, hey, after we acquire you, you have to get like, 10 million in sales to get your next 5 million earn out. I actually think it's really bad for both sides, because like as soon as you acquire a company, you don't want them to feel like they're another, right? You want them to feel like, hey, we're part of the same culture. But when you give them like this like hard objective, and obviously you're not going to make it easy. When you give them a difficult objective with lots of money attached, they're feeling like, hey, I'm not part of this company. I have my own objectives, and like I only care about those objectives. And then I guess from the acquiree side, like if you're selling your company, as soon as you have these performance objectives, like you don't know what you're walking into. So you have no idea, like, is this going to be a place where I can even hit those performance objectives, right? Maybe the objectives change, like the company's objectives change, but like I'm still stuck in a contract that has to hit like 10 million in sales. I just think that's so messy. I would say for both sides, I would completely avoid performance based acquisition objectives.
So will you just handle it with equity? Like how do you align incentives after the acquisition?
I think it's fine to have time-based retention. I think that's pretty reasonable. It's very, it's very hard for the company to take that away from you. Like it's very easy to sue on if they really do it. And it's very clean. It's like, hey, you work here for 4 years. This is what you get every year. It's actually fairly similar as an employee would get, but obviously instead it's maybe a little more, and it's maybe more equity.
Fair enough. Daniel, what do you think?
Getting acquired by Immad sounds great. Like he sounds like some of the companies are, rough on you and others are not. I mean, one thing that's really good is just talk to investment bankers. Don't sign anything, but the great thing about talking to investment bankers is they'll give you a lot of free time. And I noticed that like over the years, you talk to investment bankers, you create relationships. They're kind of like data brokers. They kind of know a lot what's going on in the industry. They know who was sold to who. They know,
What's the best piece of advice you got from an investment banker?
I mean, honestly, for me, it was just like the process itself. And like, it's like interviewing just employees. You kind of see who's like really good at it and who's successful. And then you see who's like kind of not good at it and they just haven't had like really good exits. So it was fun one time, I had the investment banker that sold WhatsApp in my office. It was great. It was just telling me like, just a lot of stuff about like what you could do. And he's like, laying out these plans. And I'm like, this is amazing. He's spending like hours and hours with me just for no reason, just to hang out. And like, that's literally what investment bankers do, is they try to look for clients all day and they try to look for like their relationship building. And, I guess
WhatsApp is the greatest deal ever struck, probably. Did he tell you any fun idea from the WhatsApp deal, how he pull that off?
He was just super proud. It sounded like the deal wasn't that hard, honestly.
Yeah, I don't think it's that hard. like Zuck was chasing them down, right?
Yeah, it was actually, he's like, but he was proud that he was part of it, and he was just talking through it like in such a
I wonder
good
if he
way.
made a 5% cut on that. That would be crazy. 5% on 20 billion.
It was 3%.
1 billion.
Yeah. The one piece of advice I got from an investment banker that was like very actionable and I really liked is if you get and I actually use it for other negotiations as well. It's like if you get a deal that you know is not good, just don't even say I'm going to think about it. Just reject it straight away. And it's like a really powerful move. It's like someone's like sends you a deal, and you're just like you have to have an idea of what you're willing to like walk away from. But you just instantly reject it. You just say, "Hey, this is not good enough. Like, there's no point in us talking any further." And you don't even give like a counter. You just reject it. And that's like that. I did that like 2 or 3 times, and I've done that in other situations. But it's like so powerful. It's like I'm not even negotiating the space. It's like we're not even talking in the right space.
That's a good advice. I've only had fairly negative experiences with investment bankers. Like I've worked with a lot of them. As you know, when we were public, we had 4 or 5 different like firms representing us. So it was like.
Well, Daniel's key is to never pay them. Then you can't complain.
We
about
we paid millions to investment bankers. They made more money than a lot of other people. So it's like but. One thing I realized about investment bankers is that they actually change their advice depending on like, who's paying them and like who's putting pressure on them. And like, you're doing business with me on this deal, but also another deal. So, we have a bigger business relationship. So I'll change the advice to favor you or favor like, your point of view. So it's a very interesting industry. They do work hard. They're like lawyers. They work super hard. It's kind of hard to imagine how they have a life, honestly. Sometimes it's like, but, I found them to be very malleable. It's like, and not really truth tellers, I would say. So I actually, my respect for them declined, after that experience.
Kind of like a car salesman or a real estate agent is what you're saying? Or
it's like a financial broker, but like, it's almost a little bit like, a rent seeker. They're just like seeking rent out of these transactions. And like, the value they provide is very questionable, I think.
Daniel, do you just cap off this kind of acquisition conversation? Do you have any regrets? Do you feel good that you kind of sold that company? I mean, you worked on it for a long time, right? 14 years. Like, how's your kind of like outlook now that it's kind of behind you?
I have no regrets. I mean, I think that the team there is phenomenal, and I think that honestly, like I'm really happy about everything, and I don't have any regrets. I feel like startups are a hard journey, and I'm grateful to have just gone through the journey and not have failed, because I talk to founders all day, and they have horror story after horror story. Like people are running out of cash and they still haven't found product market fit, or they've worked on it and they don't have enough revenue and they've worked on it 11 years. And I'm like, oh, there's so many different types of issues out there. So for me, I'm grateful I got through the journey and like had a really great exit. And the acquirer was really great. They were really great people, honestly. Like, so I feel like I was fortunate in life to be in a good position, right place, right time, right team. I'm just honestly like, it's one of these situations where I don't have too many regrets.
I think you need more excitement in your life, Daniel. Hopefully your next startup will have a bit more drama.
I mean, there's always like stress in startups, but that's just the game if you're going to get into it. But I flipped the script and I'm like, if I was like working construction, and I would wake up at 4 a.m. to start to, mix the concrete, that's a rough life. I'm like, we've got it good. In some ways, when you flip the script, I'm like, it could be way harder if you're doing something that you utterly hate. And I'm like, I do like what I do. It's stressful. It sounds like, Raj, that one experience was horrible, like with the intern, but like, in some ways.
I probably have 10 to 20 more stories that were, equally horrific, because we were constantly running out of money. So we had the exact opposite type of experience as you, but yeah, but I'm glad to know. And all the founders should know there is a path like yours, Daniel, like, which is like, kind of like seems like you're floating on clouds, like you're just basically, for 14 years, you're like, I mean, did you have any existential moments?
Oh, I mean, it happens all the time. That's just the nature of being a founder. But like, what's on the other side of that? Like, if you think about it, do you want to go work for Google, Raj? Like, do you want to like go work for, you know what I mean? Like be an employee, 5,000, 20, whatever, how many they've thousands and thousands of employees. Like, I guess it's like I always flip the script to make myself realize like what's on the other side. I do think there's times when being a founder sucks. It's just the nature of the game, though. It's like it's a rough grind. There's a lot of problems, and it's like, how do you get through those? And I think your company became public, so that's a different beast. I've never like taken a company public, so that's a different level of stress that I don't know, I would say, which is,
I think your overall point, though, Daniel, is really good. And I think it is like, hey, I would rather have this grind and stress and like existential issues than like have a really boring existence where I'm just unmotivated to wake up in the morning and do things, right? Like, I think that's the choice you're making as a founder. It's like on one side you have like, and like obviously there are probably meaningful jobs out there that people do get motivated by, but yeah, for whatever reasons, founders probably don't find them as much meaning in them. And like it's either that or like you kind of have these kind of stressful things.
It's like I think it's like for me, you ever play the game Risk or like chess? You guys probably played chess. Those games get me like excited, and I'm like, how do I win? And my brain starts to like go into this almost like flow state where like in a startup you're always thinking about your startup and it does take over your life, but you're almost in a flow state where you're like, how do I get to the next level? It's like a video game in a sense. Like, how do I keep going? And that excites me, and like in a really, really good way. Again, like they're the things that suck also. I'm not going to lie. There's stuff that sucks in startups. So
yeah.
But,
even in my worst moments in any startup that I've worked on, I've never felt like working at Google would be better. So, I feel like that's, startups, you're living life to its max, right? I think, Immad, you put in one of your posts, right? This is like life on hard mode. Some people just like life on hard mode, and same with having kids, right? As you said. So like, I've never thought for one moment, I wish I didn't have kids or anything like that. So it's like, even though it's hard at points, you got to embrace it, and that's kind of the journey you embrace when you go on the journey. But that's why also most people should not be founders, right? Because it's a very specific life, and if you choose to go on it, you have to really enjoy the chaos.
Live for the stress in its own way. So Daniel, when you kind of came back to the, I guess, like startup world, to the ideation world, after kind of 14 years of running DrChrono, what did you think of the fundraising landscape? And obviously your company is kind of AI focused. What kind of drew you to that?
And why RevOps? Like, was healthcare, you just want to stay away from healthcare? Like, it seems like you've developed expertise there as well.
One thing that's really strange is I kind of like for the first company, there was like not a lot of information. There really wasn't. We started 2008, 2009 timeframe. There was just nothing out there to like start a company. I feel like it was like a black box, and you kind of just figure it out. You bump along the way, and you're like, oh, I should be a Delaware C Corp. No one told me that. Like this one lawyer is like telling me I should be a Delaware C Corp. Like now it's almost like a factory where you can get all of the information on everything and doing startups, and at least at the early stages, like just to get that going. And, who knew like what an investor was? Like back then I had no idea. Like 2008, 2007, there was nothing. There was like no information. It was Paul Graham's articles online and nothing else. Like, and I think investors use that to their advantage. The bad investors out there would use that to their advantage to take advantage of founders. I feel like the script is equalized in a sense. Like there's so much information now. Like when I started my second company, it's just like a fire hose like shooting at me of like just how many things you can do and like what you can do and like where to get funding and who to get, like what kind of investors are out there and, what kind of PE firms are out there, what kind of this, what kind of that, what kind of technology. Like it's just, it's a different world now. Like, but I was heads down for 14 years. I was just grinding it out, like doing my startup, like not looking at that stuff, right? Like I was just like, how do I get to the next phase? Let's get more revenue. Let's figure out like how to build the team and build a better culture. But now it's just like, I feel like there's a process, like baking a cake almost, at least to get to this certain point in a company. And then it's like, it's just changed drastically.
What did you find as like the most useful resource and when you were reapproaching starting a new company?
All the articles out there, it wasn't one like perfect source, but like, Y Combinator has a ton of stuff, YouTube has a ton of stuff, Medium, there's just all this just different sources of stuff. And there's no like one source of truth. I just think that there's so many different places that you could just get information from. And, you just start on YouTube and look at the Y Combinator stuff to start. And they just have some really good advice. You can go anywhere. Honestly, you can go anywhere and like, look, there's all these new accelerators out there that are just throwing money at founders like Neo. I've heard of that. I don't really know too much about them. And then there's like,
don't mention Neo and Y Combinator in the same sentence.
I don't really know them, but I'm like, hey,
they're arch rivals now. Yeah.
I don't know how that happened, but I'm like, all right, there is more like funding available and more support and structure.
There's a lot. Immad, what would you recommend to founders, starting off now? What should they read? What should they do?
Yeah, actually, Y Combinator is probably my go-to recommendation. They have like a whole set of articles on like starting a company, fundraising, etc. And then I am like a big podcast aficionado. So there's this podcast, there's 20-minute VC, there's a bunch of podcasts where there's like founders just talking about their journeys, and I think you can learn a lot of like nuggets of wisdom from those.
Yeah, Y Combinator itself has a good podcast. They have some interesting segments on that podcast. Like they have like these like a dedicated like how to build a B2C company and stuff like that. Like it's quite actionable advice. Even I watch those. I'm like, oh yeah, it reminds me of some like these tactics that I might have forgotten. And the game changes. You got to stay up to date. But it would be good actually, Immad, to put together hey, here are the podcast episodes you should like listen to in your first year of a founder. Here's like the articles, we should update that list as advice to other founders. Probably would be a good social post too. I think because the game has changed. I mean, before it used to be the PG essays, right? Like that's the main thing you would read. And there might be one or two other. I used to read Mark Suster's blog, which is really good.
Oh yeah, that was
both
good.
sides of the table.
And Fred Wilson's blog. Those were like the three. Those were like literally only the three things that existed back then.
Totally.
Why not healthcare, Daniel? Why did you start a kind of B2B AI company?
I'm looking for something that I could apply to all businesses in the US. And it's like, if I can help them collect their revenue, it's a big business. It's a big space. And, I think it's adjacent to healthcare in a sense, because healthcare does have money involved. So I think it's like adjacent to it, but it's just a broader thing that I can sell to like many, many different types of companies. I did want to sell to startups. Like part of it is like getting plugged into the startup community. So like, I literally am pitching startups all day on using our stuff. It's great. Like,
is that more fun than pitching doctors or I guess administrators?
It's just different. I mean, doctors, I actually think it was fun talking to doctors. I learned a lot, even about just my own health. Like you get free healthcare. And you're pitching them. So it's just different. But I think founders, selling to founders is part of the fun of this company. And, but like, I spoke to one company yesterday and I had no idea that there was an industry. I can't talk about it because like they may actually buy our product, but I was learning a lot about just a totally random industry. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like, it's almost like being, I know you invest a lot. It's like,
yeah, you get that from it. It reminded me of investing. I mean, that's the main reason I invest. It's just like super fun to hear about like random space tech, right? I wouldn't be in the room to hear about it if it wasn't for investing.
I think that's part of the reason why I started this company is because you're kind of in the room and they're pitching and telling you like what their revenue is and what they're building and how do they use the product and that sort of thing. So you can sell it to a lot of people. And I think that was the main reason. It's like something that's broad, global, and money touches everybody. I mean, your startup does money, it's essentially money startup. So it's similar. It was super similar.
That's what we'll call from now on. Money startup.
Fintechs have been rebranded. It actually goes back to the investment banker thing. Like being in the flow of money is like I think actually like a good way to build a startup. Right, people willing to pay for things that help you collect money quicker and do these kind of like revenue related things.
Yeah, I mean, even Mercury, it's for startups. So you probably talk to startups even just from that. Not only in the investing. So now it's you have all of these.
Actually, like this is a good sales tip. When I talk to startups about Mercury, I literally spend like the first 20 minutes out of 30 minutes just talking about their startup because, I mean, it's just way more interesting to me than like selling Mercury. But people really appreciate it. People want to talk about that and get like ideas and advice or whatever, much more than they want to be pitched. And it helps build that relationship. And then, in the last 10 minutes, I'm like, oh yeah, any issues with your bank? And everyone's got issues. So that's kind of the flow of me pitching Mercury. Maybe it's not the most efficient, but actually makes the whole sales process like way more entertaining for me.
It's like the sale is like, should I invest in your startup or not? Like, it's like,
no, I'm not asking them to
you're scouting.
Yeah. I'm not trying to invest. I'm just genuinely curious in what they're building.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, I'm sure like a lot of founders are excited to talk to you and get your thoughts.
Yeah. Cool. I guess we're at time. Any final thoughts, Daniel or Raj?
This is great. Thanks, Daniel. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, no, thank you guys for having me. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate being on, and happy to do it again in the future with you guys.
Yeah, we should definitely have you get some more juicy gossip about this acquisition that you didn't tell that much about. But yeah, this was fun.
ChatGPT has details. So.
Oh, really? Wow. Maybe we should have just read that out.
Exactly.
Well, anyway, thanks for joining, Daniel. Thanks for listening, everyone. Talk to you again in 1 week. And in the meantime, subscribe, leave us a review, and let us know what you think on our Tribe chat.